Space sparkled like scattered diamonds across the viewport of the Aurora's vigil. Captain Alara Miles stood motionless, hands clasped behind her back, her reflection ghosting against the reinforced glass as she stared into the vast emptiness of the Void Ring's outer boundary. The 13 Worlds Alliance had enjoyed a tenuous peace since the Infinity War ended 3 years ago, but out here at the edge of explored space, peace felt as fragile as the hull separating her from the vacuum. "Captain," Lieutenant Soren called from the navigation console. "We're approaching the final checkpoint of our patrol route." Alara nodded without turning. "Maintain current velocity. Any unusual readings?" "Negative, Captain. All sectors clear." The ship hummed around her, its rhythmic vibrations, as familiar as her own heartbeat, after 5 years commanding Aurora's vigil. Yet, she couldn't shake the restlessness that had plagued her since they'd begun patrolling this sector 3 weeks ago. "You're thinking about them again, aren't you?" Lieutenant Kian Rydell's voice broke through her thoughts. Her second-in-command stood beside her now, his dark eyes carrying the same haunted look they'd held since the Dark Gate incident. They were the only survivors from that massacre, a fact that bound them with invisible chains of guilt and grief. "We lost 17 good people at that gate, Kian," she said quietly. "How do you stop thinking about that?" "You don't," he answered, his voice equally soft. "But eventually you learn to think about other things too." Their gentle conversation was shattered by a sudden wail of alarms. Red emergency lights bathed the bridge in an ominous glow. "What is it?" Alara demanded, already moving toward the central command station. "Unidentified signal. Captain, Lieutenant Rydell," reported, hands flying across his console. Wait, this can't be right." "Report, Lieutenant." She ordered, the calmness in her voice belying the surge of adrenaline. "It's a panic beacon, Captain. Class Alpha emergency protocol." The bridge fell silent. A Class Alpha beacon was the most urgent distress call in the Alliance's communication arsenal, a call only authorized in extinction-level emergencies. "Source?" she asked, though she already suspected the answer. "The signal originated from coordinates matching the Helion Experimental Squadron. They've been off-grid for 3 days." Alara leaned over the console, studying the incoming data. The Helion Squadron 12 of the Alliance's most advanced ships had been conducting classified experiments in this sector. Their sudden disappearance had prompted Aurora's Vigil's patrol mission, ostensibly as a routine security measure. But Alara had suspected there was more to it. Any message attached to the beacon? Lieutenant Rydell tapped a command, and a fragment of audio scratched through the bridge speakers. "Run! Run now!" The transmission ended abruptly, leaving only static in its wake. "Can we get a visual?" Alara asked, throat tight. Attempting to establish link, the communications officer responded. The main view screen flickered, and for a moment Alara thought it had malfunctioned. The entire screen had shifted to an eerie green hue, as though they were looking through night vision equipment. Stars seemed to bend at impossible angles, light curving unnaturally around a central point of absolute darkness. "What am I looking at?" she whispered. Dr. Mirasol, the ship's chief engineer, approached the screen with narrowed eyes. Her dark hair was pulled back in a severe bun face, illuminated by the sickly green glow. "That's not a technical malfunction," she said, voice tight with controlled fear. "That's real. Something is warping the fabric of space itself." "Captain," Lieutenant Rydell interrupted, "we have orders to report any unusual findings to command before taking action. We should withdraw to a safe distance and wait for instructions." Alara's gaze remained fixed on the screen, where the green distortion pulsed like a heartbeat. "How far are we from the beacon's coordinates?" "Approximately 6 light hours, Captain." 6 hours at maximum speed. 6 hours to reach whoever had sent that desperate message. "Prepare for hyperspace jump," she ordered. Lieutenant Rydell stiffened beside her. "Captain, with all due respect, Alliance protocols clearly state—" "I know the protocols, Lieutenant," she cut him off. "But that beacon is from our people. I'm not abandoning them to whatever that is." She gestured toward the warped space on the view screen. "We don't know it's from our people," he argued. That signal could be anything, a trap, a natural phenomenon, or something worse. Alara turned to face her second-in-command fully. There's only one way to find out. Plot a course, maximum speed, but keep us at a safe observation distance when we arrive. Lieutenant Rydell's jaw tightened, but he nodded curtly. Yes, Captain. As the bridge crew rushed to execute her orders, Alara returned her gaze to the viewport. The endless stars offered no comfort now. For a moment, she could have sworn she heard whispers in the recycled air, echoes of voices crying out in terror, then silenced. Coming up on hyperspace coordinates, the navigation officer announced. Engage, Alara commanded. The stars outside stretched into brilliant streaks as Aurora's vigil tore through the fabric of spacetime. Alara gripped the edge of her command chair, unable to shake the feeling that they were diving headfirst into the abyss. 6 hours later, Aurora's vigil emerged from hyperspace at the calculated safe distance from the beacon's coordinates. The bridge fell silent as the main view screen revealed the horror that awaited them. The green distortion they had observed from afar now dominated the entire sector. In its center floated the twisted remains of what had once been ships, the Helion Squadron. Their hulls were warped beyond recognition, metal bent at impossible angles, as though crushed by some immense pressure. But it was the strange organic material coating the wreckage that sent ice down Alara's spine. Black, viscous tendrils crept across the metal surfaces, like veins pulsing with an internal light that seemed to absorb rather than emit illumination. Life signs, she asked, her voice hardly more than a whisper. The science officer shook her head. Nothing human, Captain, but there's something out there. Energy patterns unlike anything in our database. The beacon, Lieutenant Rydell asked. Still active, the communications officer confirmed. But, he frowned, adjusting his instruments. That's strange. According to these readings, the signal isn't coming from the wreckage at all. It's coming from... He looked up, face pale. It's coming from beyond the wreckage, Captain. From inside what appears to be an artificial black hole. As if triggered by those words, the ship's communication system crackled to life. No one had activated it. They come. A voice whispered, distorted, and barely recognizable as human. They come through the darkness. They are the darkness. Then silence. What was that? Lieutenant Rydell demanded. Who's broadcasting on our internal systems? Before anyone could answer, a massive shadow passed over the ship. On the view screen, something moved among the wreckage, something vast and formless, like a sphere of concentrated darkness that bent light around its edges. Shields up, Alara ordered. Defensive positions. The bridge erupted into controlled chaos as officers rushed to battle stations. The shadow, what Dr. Saul would later classify in her report as the Shadow Sphere Alpha entity, surged toward them with impossible speed. The impact sent the Aurora's vigil spinning. Warning alarms blared as the ship's defensive systems registered multiple hull breaches. Damage report, Alara called out, picking herself up from the floor where the impact had thrown her. Port, shields down to 30%. Lieutenant Rydell reported a trickle of blood running from his temple. Hull integrity compromised on decks 7 through 9. Emergency force fields holding, but we've lost the main sensor array. Alara steadied herself against her command chair as the ship shuddered beneath them. Dr. Saul, I need those engines at full capacity. Prepare for emergency jump. The engineer's voice came back strained over the comms. We can't jump, Captain. Whatever that thing did to us, it's disrupted the hyperdrive matrix. We're stuck here until I can realign it. Alara's mind raced through their options, each more desperate than the last. How long? 3 hours minimum, Dr. Saul replied. And that's if nothing else goes wrong. Another impact rocked the ship. The lights flickered, plunging the bridge into darkness for a heart-stopping moment before the emergency systems kicked in. We don't have 3 hours, Lieutenant Rydell said grimly. Alara stared at the view screen where the shadow sphere hovered just beyond firing range, as though studying them. Behind it, the Helion wreckage continued to pulse with that sickly, organic material. "What is that thing?" she whispered. "Unknown, Captain," the science officer replied. "But I'm detecting energy fluctuations consistent with thought patterns. Highly complex thought patterns. It's intelligent. More than that, if these readings are accurate, it's processing information at a rate that would make our most advanced quantum computers look primitive." Lieutenant Rydell leaned closer. "If it's that intelligent, maybe we can communicate with it." "Or maybe that's exactly what it wants," Alara countered. "The beacon? Something feels wrong. Why would a distress signal originate from inside a black hole? That's impossible." "Actually," Dr. Sol's voice came through the comms, "not entirely impossible. Theoretical physics suggests information can escape the event horizon under specific quantum conditions. But the energy required would be what Dr. Yalara prompted when the engineer fell silent. Would be equivalent to the complete conversion of conscious thought into pure energy." Dr. Sol finished quietly. "It's a forbidden technology. The Psyche core experiments were shut down decades ago due to catastrophic side effects." Alara exchanged a glance with Lieutenant Rydell. The Psyche core. A theoretical technology that could convert human consciousness into energy. It had been banned after test subjects reported experiencing collective nightmares and hallucinations that persisted even after the experiments ended. The Helion Squadron, Alara realized aloud. They weren't on a standard patrol. They were testing something, weren't they? Something to do with the Psyche core technology. Before anyone could respond, the communications system crackled again. This time, the voice was clearer, yet somehow more disturbing for its clarity. "Answer the call," it whispered. "Open your mind. Let us in." On the view screen, the shadow sphere pulsed and expanded tendrils of darkness reaching toward the Aurora's vigil, like grasping fingers. "All hands prepare for impact," Alara shouted. The darkness engulfed them. When Alara opened her eyes, the bridge was bathed in red emergency lighting. The view screen displayed only static, and half the control consoles were dark. "Status report," she croaked, pulling herself to her feet. "Main power at 30%. Lieutenant Rydell reported, his voice strained. "Life support functioning on auxiliary systems. Weapons offline. Communications limited to internal only. Casualties." Lieutenant Rydell's expression tightened. 12 confirmed, Captain. 28 injured and... He hesitated. 8 missing. Missing? How can anyone be missing on a sealed vessel? "Unknown, Captain. They simply vanished from sealed compartments." Alara felt a chill run through her. "The shadow sphere. We passed through it. Or it passed through us," Lieutenant Rydell said. "Sensors recorded nothing for 73 seconds. Then we were here." "And where is here exactly?" The science officer looked up from her partially functioning console. "According to what limited readings I can get, we're inside the event horizon, Captain." Silence fell over the bridge as the implications sank in. Inside the event horizon of a black hole, a place from which nothing, not even light, should be able to escape. "That's impossible," Alara whispered. "We'd be crushed to subatomic particles." "It's an artificial construction," the science officer explained. "Not a true stellar black hole. More like a bubble of altered spacetime. The laws of physics don't quite apply normally here." "The beacon," Alara remembered suddenly. "Can we locate the source now?" The communications officer worked his damaged console. "Signal is stronger, much stronger. It's coming from bearing 347, approximately 20,000 kilometers from our position." "Can we get there, Dr. Sol? What's the status of our engines?" "Impulse drives are functional, Captain," the engineer's voice came back. "But I wouldn't recommend moving until we understand where we are. This environment is highly unstable." Alara stared at the static-filled view screen, weighing their options. Stay and repair, hoping whatever had attacked them wouldn't return, or press forward seeking answers and possibly a way out. The decision was made for her when the static on the view screen suddenly cleared, revealing a massive structure floating in the darkness. It resembled a space station, but unlike any design in the Alliance database. Its architecture was organic and flowing with spires that twisted like frozen tendrils, reaching into the void. And it was transmitting the beacon signal. "Take us in half impulse," Alara ordered. "Defensive systems on full alert." "Captain," Lieutenant Rydell protested, "we have no idea what that structure is." "Exactly why we need to investigate," she replied. "Whatever it is, it's our best chance of understanding what happened to the Helion Squadron and finding a way out of here." As Aurora's vigil approached the alien structure, Ilara organized a boarding team. Despite Lieutenant Rydell's objections, she insisted on leading it herself. "The crew needs their captain right now," Lieutenant Rydell argued, as they stood in the shuttle bay preparing for departure. "The crew needs answers," Alara countered, checking the charge on her particle pistol. "And I'm going to get them. You have command until I return." The boarding team consisted of Alara, Dr. Saul, and 4 security officers. As their shuttle detached from Aurora's vigil and approached the alien structure, Alara couldn't shake the feeling of being watched by countless, unseen eyes. "Energy readings are off the charts," Dr. Saul murmured, studying her scanner. "Whatever this place is, it's powered by something our instruments can barely register." "Life signs?" Alara asked. "Nothing definitive. But there are fluctuations, patterns that resemble neural activity, but dispersed throughout the structure itself. It's as if the station is alive, or at least aware." The shuttle docked with surprising ease, latching onto an entrance that seemed to anticipate their arrival. The airlock cycled automatically, inviting them in. "Stay alert," Alara instructed, as they stepped into the alien corridor. "We move as a unit. Any sign of danger, we retreat immediately." The interior of the structure defied conventional architecture. Corridors curved and branched organically, their surfaces smooth, and slightly warm to the touch. The lighting came from bioluminescent patterns that pulsed along the walls, responding to their presence. "This technology," Dr. Saul whispered in awe. "It's centuries beyond anything the Alliance has developed." "Look," one of the security officers called, pointing ahead. "There's something written on the wall." As they approached, Ilara felt her blood run cold. Etched into the surface of the corridor was a message in perfect Alliance standard. "Welcome home, Alara Miles." "Captain," Dr. Saul's voice sounded distant. "How could it know your name?" Before Alara could respond, the corridor ahead shifted and expanded, revealing a vast chamber. In its center stood what appeared to be a control console, a familiar design amidst the alien architecture. "That's Alliance technology," Alara realized, approaching cautiously. "Specifically, Helion Squadron design." The console was active displays, showing data streams that scrolled too quickly to read. But at its center was a simple message. "The beacon calls, answer it." "Captain, I don't like this," Dr. Saul said, scanning the device. "This console shows signs of the banned Psyche Core integration. If the Helion Squadron was experimenting with consciousness-to-energy conversion, then what we encountered might not be alien at all," Alara finished the thought. "It could be human consciousness transformed into something else." A sound like distant whispers filled the chamber, growing louder, until individual voices could almost be distinguished. Familiar voices, the crew of the Helion Squadron, calling out in a cacophony of desperation and ecstasy. The console pulsed, and a holographic interface materialized above it. A swirling vortex of light and shadow that seemed to beckon Alara forward. "Captain, don't," Dr. Saul warned, grabbing her arm. "If this is Psyche Core technology, interfacing with it could transform your consciousness as well." Alara stared into the swirling vortex. What if that's the only way to communicate with whatever the Helion crew became? The only way to find answers? Or it could be a trap, the engineer insisted. A way to harvest more consciousness to feed whatever they've become. The whispers grew more insistent, the vortex pulsing with increasing intensity. And within its swirling depths, Alara began to see faces, the faces of her former crew, those lost at the Dark Gate incident. They were calling to her, reaching out with expressions of peaceful joy. "You see them too, don't you?" Dr. Saul whispered. I see my husband who died in the Infinity War. This thing, it reads our minds, shows us what we most want to see. With immense effort, Alara tore her gaze away from the vortex. We need to get back to the ship, now. Whatever this is, we're not equipped to deal with it. As if triggered by her decision, the alien structure shuddered around them. The bioluminescent patterns along the walls flared brightly, then dimmed to an angry red glow. "There is no escape," appeared on all displays. "You must answer the call." "Move," Alara ordered, drawing her weapon. "Back to the shuttle." They ran through the twisting corridors which seemed to rearrange themselves to block their path. The whispers had transformed into agonized screams that echoed from every surface. One of the security officers cried out as the floor beneath him suddenly liquefied, pulling him downward. His comrades grabbed his arms, but the material hardened instantly, trapping him. "Help me," he pleaded, as the strange substance began to creep up his body. "Cut him out," Alara ordered, firing her particle beam at the material. The beam had no effect. The officer screamed as the substance reached his chest, constricting around him. "Captain, we can't help him," Dr. Saul shouted, pulling Alara away. "We have to go." With a final, anguished look at the trapped officer, whose screams were fading as the material covered his face, Alara turned and ran. They lost another security officer to a sudden wall that materialized between her and the rest of the group, cutting her off mid-sentence. By the time they reached the shuttle, only Alara, Dr. Saul, and one security officer remained. "Get us out of here," Alara commanded as they sealed the shuttle door. The engines roared to life, but the shuttle didn't move. Outside, the viewport tendrils of the same black, viscous material they'd seen on the Helion wreckage began to creep across the hull. "It's trying to absorb us," Dr. Saul realized, frantically working the controls. "The engines are at maximum, but we're being held in place." Through the viewport, Alara watched in horror as the alien structure began to transform. Its elegant spires twisted and contorted, reshaping into a massive face, a grotesque approximation of human features stretched across the void. "Answer the call." It intoned its voice, vibrating through the shuttle's hull. "Become one with the galactic nightmare." "What do you want from us?" Alara shouted, though she knew the entity couldn't hear her through the vacuum of space. But it answered anyway, its voice materializing directly in their minds. "Evolution, transcendence. The Psyche Core showed us the way. We shed our physical forms to become something greater. Join us, Alara Miles. Complete the circle." The tendrils tightened around the shuttle, crushing the hull. Warning alarms blared as the atmospheric integrity was compromised. "Emergency suits," Alara ordered, pulling oxygen masks from the compartment above. As they struggled into the suits, the view screen of the shuttle flickered. The face outside disappeared, replaced by a direct communication link to Aurora's vigil. Lieutenant Rydell's concerned face filled the screen. "Captain, we've been trying to contact you. What's happening?" "Kian, listen carefully," Alara said urgently. "The Helion Squadron was experimenting with Psyche Core technology. They've transformed into something that exists beyond physical form. They're trying to pull us in too. You need to get the ship out of here." "Not without you," he insisted. "We're detecting your shuttle's distress beacon. Preparing rescue operations now." "No," Alara shouted. "You'll be captured too. The Aurora's vigil has to warn the Alliance. This thing, these galactic nightmares they want to spread. They see it as evolution." The shuttle hull groaned as the pressure increased. Cracks formed along the viewport stars of fracture lines spreading outward. "Hull breach imminent," the computer announced calmly. Lieutenant Rydell's face hardened with resolve. "Hold tight, Captain. We're coming for you." The communication cut off as the shuttle's systems failed one by one. Through the cracking viewport, Alara saw Aurora's vigil approaching, weapons blazing against the massive entity. "They can't win this fight," Dr. Saul whispered, her face pale behind her oxygen mask. Alara knew she was right. The entity was too vast, too powerful, but she had to try something, anything, to save her remaining crew. An idea formed, born of desperate logic. If the entity was created through Psyche Core technology, Perhaps it could be disrupted by the same. Dr. Sol, she said urgently, you said the psyche core converts consciousness to energy. Can it work in reverse? Can we overload this entity with energy, force it to destabilize? The engineer's eyes widened. Theoretically, yes. A massive energy surge directed at the proper frequency could disrupt the quantum coherence that allows consciousness to maintain form outside a biological vessel. But we'd need the shuttle's power core, Ilara finished. If we overload it while targeting the entity's central mass, it could work, Dr. Sol agreed. But whoever triggers the overload would be at ground zero of the explosion. Ilara nodded grimly. Get to the escape pod with Officer Tanner. I'll initiate the sequence. Captain, no, Dr. Sol protested. There has to be another way. There isn't time, Ilara insisted, as the hull creaked ominously around them. That's an order, Doctor. With reluctance etched in every movement, Dr. Sol and the security officer made their way to the shuttle's single escape pod. Alone at the controls, Ilara began the complex process of overriding the safety protocols on the power core. Outside, Aurora's Vigil continued its valiant but futile battle against the entity. Through gaps in the entity's mass, Ilara could see her ship taking heavy damage, its hull breached in multiple sections. As she worked, the entity's voice returned to her mind. You cannot destroy what has transcended physical form, Ilara Miles. Your actions are futile. Maybe, she muttered, fingers flying across the controls. But I'm still going to try. The power core warning reached critical levels, the shuttle's computer announcing the imminent, catastrophic failure in placid tones. Ilara closed her eyes, thinking of her lost crew at the dark gate of Kian, and the others fighting outside of all the lives across the 13 worlds that might be threatened if this entity escaped the artificial black hole. A thunderous impact jolted her eyes open. Through the cracked viewport, she saw that Aurora's Vigil had rammed the entity, carving a path through its amorphous mass directly to the shuttle. The ship's tractor beam activated, latching onto the small craft. The communication system flickered to life one final time. Lieutenant Rydell's face appeared bloody but determined. Forgive me, Captain, he said, but I'm overriding your command on this one. The tractor beam pulled the shuttle toward Aurora's Vigil's launch bay, even as the entity's tendrils tried to maintain their grip. Kian, the power core is already overloading, Ilara shouted. You've got to release us. The explosion will destroy the Vigil too. Not if we can launch you toward the entity's center mass first, he replied. We've detected what appears to be a central nucleus, the source of its consciousness. Dr. Sol transmitted her theory about disrupting it. As the shuttle was drawn into the launch bay, Ilara realized what her second-in-command intended. You're going to use the shuttle as a torpedo. He nodded grimly. Once you're aboard, we'll seal the shuttle, re-engage the tractor beam in reverse, and launch it directly at the target. Then we make a run for the edge of the event horizon. We'll never make it, Ilara said. Not with the damage the ship has sustained. We might, Lieutenant Rydell insisted. It's our only chance. The shuttle shuddered as it settled into the launch bay. The door hissed open and Lieutenant Rydell himself stood there extending a hand to help her out. No time to waste, Captain, he said. That power core won't hold much longer. As they raced through the corridors of Aurora's Vigil, Ilara felt the ship groaning around them. The damage was worse than she'd imagined, entire sections exposed to vacuum emergency force fields, the only thing keeping the atmosphere contained. They reached the bridge where the remaining crew worked frantically at their stations. Shuttle, secured in launch bay, core overload at 87%, the tactical officer reported. Tractor beam, ready for reverse thrust. Target plotted, the navigation officer added. Entity's central mass identified. Ilara took her position in the command chair, surveying her brave, battered crew. All hands prepare for emergency acceleration. If we're going to outrun that explosion, we'll need everything the engines have left. Dr. Sol reports the warp drive is operational, Lieutenant Rydell said. One jump, maybe two, before it fails completely. We only need one, Ilara replied. On my mark, launch the shuttle, then immediate jump to the edge of the event horizon. The view screen, showed the entity regrouping its massive face, reforming as it prepared for another attack. "Now!" Alara commanded. The ship shuddered as the tractor beam engaged, hurling the overloading shuttle directly at the heart of the entity. Simultaneously, the warp drive engaged, tearing a hole through the fabric of altered spacetime. For a moment, the laws of physics seemed suspended entirely. The explosion of the shuttle's power core expanded in slow motion, a sphere of pure energy that engulfed the entity's central mass. The Galactic Nightmare's silent scream reverberated through every mind aboard Aurora's Vigil, as its consciousness was disrupted at the quantum level. Then, reality reasserted itself with brutal force. The shockwave hit the ship just as it entered warp, amplifying the spatial distortion exponentially. Aurora's Vigil was flung through space like a leaf in a hurricane systems, failing catastrophically as the structural integrity reached breaking point. Alara was thrown from her chair, consciousness fading as her head struck the deck. The last thing she saw before darkness claimed her was the view screen showing the collapsing bubble of the artificial black hole, and beyond it, the blessed emptiness of normal space. When Alara regained consciousness, the bridge was barely recognizable. Most of the stations were dark, the view screen cracked, but still partially functional. Emergency lighting cast long shadows across the debris-strewn deck. "Captain," a weak voice called. Lieutenant Rydell lay a few meters away, a support beam pinning his lower body to the floor. Alara crawled to his side, ignoring the pain that flared through her own injuries. "Hold on, Kian. I'll get you out." "Don't bother," he said with grim certainty. "Internal sensors are still partially functioning. I can see the damage." He coughed, a spray of blood staining his lips. "How many survived?" Alara glanced around the bridge. Only 3 other officers showed signs of life, all injured to varying degrees. "I don't know yet, but we made it out. We're clear of the artificial black hole." Lieutenant Rydell's eyes focused on the damaged view screen, where the stars shone with normal, reassuring light. "Did we destroy it?" "The entity." "I think we disrupted it," Alara said carefully. "Whether that's the same as destruction, I don't know." She helped him into a more comfortable position, knowing even as she did so that his injuries were fatal. The beam had crushed his internal organs. He was bleeding out internally. "The beacon," he whispered. "Is it still transmitting?" Alara looked to the communications officer, who managed to check her damaged console. "No active transmission detected," she reported. A relief passed over Lieutenant Rydell's features. "Good, that's good." "I'll get Dr. Sol," Alara started to say, but Lieutenant Rydell's hand weakly grasped her arm. "Stay," he said. "Please, there's something you need to know." Alara knelt beside him, taking his hand in hers. "I'm listening." "The Dark Gate incident," he whispered. "It wasn't an accident. The Alliance knew. They knew something was there. Something like what we just faced. They sent us in as bait." Cold shock washed through Alara. "What are you saying?" "Classified orders," Lieutenant Rydell continued, his voice fading. "Captain Mercer received them directly from High Command. We were to investigate an anomalous signal. They suspected it was connected to Psyche core experiments conducted in secret after the official ban. "Why didn't you tell me this before?" Alara demanded, anger briefly overriding grief. "I was under orders," he replied. "And after everyone died, I couldn't face it. Couldn't face that their deaths were part of some experiment." His grip on her hand tightened with surprising strength. "But Helion Squadron wasn't an accident either. They were continuing the experiments, Alara. The Alliance is playing with forces they don't understand." "Why tell me now?" A ghost of a smile touched his bloodied lips. "Because someone needs to stop them. Someone needs to warn the 13 worlds what's really out there, what their leaders are risking." His eyes drifted toward the view screen where the stars continued their eternal dance. "Do you remember what we used to say in the Academy about the final frontier?" Alara nodded, throat tight with emotion. "That space isn't empty. It's full of wonders and horrors beyond our comprehension. We were right about the horrors, Lieutenant Rydell whispered. His grip on her hand began to slacken. Promise me you'll warn them, Alara. Promise me their deaths won't be for nothing. I promise, she said, holding his hand until his eyes closed for the final time. In the hours that followed, Alara and the surviving crew took stock of their situation. Of the original complement of 143, only 37 remained. The ship was operating on minimal power life support, limited to the central sections where survivors had gathered. Dr. Saul, who had survived with a broken arm, and lacerations confirmed what Alara already suspected. We can keep essential systems running for maybe 2 weeks. After that, she left the sentence unfinished. We've sent out distress calls, the communications officer reported. But our transmission range is severely limited, unless someone comes looking for us specifically. Alara nodded, understanding the odds. Maintain the signal, and prepare a data package with everything we've learned about the entity and the Psyche core technology. Set it to broadcast continuously, even if life support fails. That evening, or what the ship's damaged chronometers designated as evening, Alara sat alone in her quarters, recording her personal log. The truth Lieutenant Rydell had revealed weighed heavily on her, alongside the grief of losing him, and so many others. I don't know if anyone will ever hear this, she spoke into the recorder. But if you do, consider this a warning. What we encountered was not alien, at least not in origin. It was human consciousness transformed by technology we barely understand. The Psyche core experiments didn't fail. They succeeded too well, creating entities that exist beyond physical form, beyond our understanding of life itself. She paused, gathering her thoughts. Lieutenant Rydell believed the Alliance leadership knew of these entities, perhaps even sought to control them as weapons. If that's true, they're playing with forces that could consume us all. The entity we encountered, what my crew has designated the Galactic Nightmares, sees itself as the next step in human evolution. It seeks to convert all consciousness to its transcendent state. Alara looked out her viewport at the stars, wondering if somewhere among them, fragments of the entity had survived. We may have disrupted its form temporarily, but I don't believe we destroyed it completely. Consciousness converted to energy might be dispersed, but according to Dr. Saul, it would eventually reconfigure. It could be out there, still rebuilding itself, waiting. She sighed, fatigue washing over her. If rescue comes, I will deliver Lieutenant Rydell's warning personally. The Psyche core research must be permanently abandoned. Some evolutionary steps should not be taken. Some doors should remain closed. Because what waits beyond them are not wonders, but nightmares, galactic nightmares that could consume us all. 2 weeks later, with life support failing, and hope dwindling, Aurora's Vigil's damaged sensors detected an approaching vessel. It was an Alliance rescue ship responding to their beacon, at last. As the survivors were transferred to the rescue vessel, Alara stood on the bridge of her dying ship one final time. The data package containing their findings had been duplicated and hidden throughout the rescue ship, ensuring the truth would reach the 13 worlds, even if she was silenced. The commanding officer of the rescue ship approached her, with sympathy in his eyes. Captain Miles, we feared you were lost. The Aurora's Vigil was declared missing in action 3 weeks ago. We nearly were lost, she replied simply. High Command will want a full debriefing when we return, he said. What you encountered, they're very interested. Too interested, Alara thought. Lieutenant Rydell's warning echoed in her mind. Of course, she said aloud. I have much to report. As she left the bridge of Aurora's Vigil for the final time, Alara felt a strange sensation, as though unseen eyes were watching her. She paused at the threshold, looking back at the darkened bridge where so many had lived and died. For a moment she could have sworn she saw a faint green glow pulsing among the shadows, heard the whisper of voices calling her name. But when she blinked, there was nothing but the empty shell of a dying ship. On the rescue vessel, as Aurora's Vigil faded from view, Alara stood at the viewport, watching her former command, until it was nothing but a speck against the void. The stars looked the same as they always had, cold and distant, but she would never see them the same way again. Somewhere in the vast emptiness between them, the galactic nightmares waited, born of human ambition and hubris. And somewhere in the heart of Alliance territory, those responsible for creating them still pursued their dangerous experiments. She touched the data chip concealed in her uniform pocket. The truth would come out. She would make sure of it for Kian, for her lost crew, for all of humanity. As the rescue ship turned toward home, Ilara noticed something on long-range sensors, a faint, anomalous signal at the edge of detection range. A beacon pulsing in a familiar pattern. Calling them back. She said nothing, watching as it faded from the sensors. Some calls should remain unanswered, some beacons unheeded. But deep in her heart, Ilara knew this wasn't the end. The galactic nightmares would return, and when they did, humanity would have to decide whether to answer their call and join their evolution, or fight to remain human in a universe where such distinctions might ultimately prove meaningless. For now, though, they were going home, back to the worlds of light and life, carrying a warning from the edge of darkness. And that would have to be enough.